To cable or not to cable? That is the question. As a boom operator, you'd probably prefer to be wireless at all times, while your sound mixer would prefer you perhaps to be cabled at all times. Now, I'm not speaking with regards to an ENG sound mixer, a guy that wears a bag right here on their chest and holds the boom, and the cable length from the end of the boom to their recorder might be only 3 or 4 feet. That's not the circumstance I'm talking about. I'm talking about an actual boom operator that's transmitting or going cabled back to their sound mixer. Now, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both a cabled and a wireless system. The cabled system, for example, would have the ability to use the preamps on either the mixer, not the person, but the actual device that's doing the mixing, or the recorder that they're using. And the preamps on that are probably going to exceed in quality the transmitter that you have on the end of a boom pole. And using those preamps of a multi-$1,000 recorder going through a cable to your boom and driving that microphone is going to be a very, very optimal circumstance. Not to mention the fact that if you're doing a scene with someone who's speaking quiet and then screaming, your sound mixer can adjust the level on the fly, the preamp gain. So you don't need to worry about adjusting that on the fly. I've worked with wireless systems before where the sound mixer has said, all right, click down or click up if I'm using an MM1, for example, as someone goes from quiet to very loud. And that would remove any and all aspects of me needing to adjust the gain on the fly if the sound mixer can adjust the trim on their mixer or recorder. Now, another obvious example would be if there was some sort of heavy RF in the area. So if, for example, you're in a circumstance like I was shooting at right across from the CDC in Atlanta a few years ago, and had all of a sudden this one time where all of our wireless completely got shot. Wireless boom wasn't even an option. So we ended up going cabled boom, and I ended up booming the entire scene, saving the day. Woohoo, boom operators. But that would not have been an option if I was only on a wireless system, because all of the wireless was getting interference and just taking major hits. Even when you scanned, it was like a black line across the entire, scan screen. So there was nothing good about it. But going cable was able to save the day. Now, a disadvantage of it is if you're, for example, using something like the Deity Connect system and you are hardlining your boom, you may end up having issues with latency, not from your boom mic on the cable system, but because all of the other transmitters that you're using for your wireless are going to either have a 19, 30, or 40 millisecond delay. So you might end up going wireless just to synchronize all the latency on your system. Those are a couple of different examples. Now, if you are using a cabled system, like for example, the 8-pin duplex on the remote audio Boombox 2 system, if you're using something like that, you can control the volume coming back hardlined into your ears as a boom operator. Because you are wired going straight to the mixer, you can have the option then of adjusting your volume on your belt. And so that way, your boom gain level that's going back to the mixer is going to be put into the mix, and then you're able to hear whatever you want to back through the system. And you can get some great sound out of that because it is not being transmitted. It's not being double transmitted at that. For example, if I'm transmitting from my boom mic over to the mixer, and then the mixer turns around and transmits back to me the mix track, by then I've had 2 generations of transmission to get to my ears. That may not be ideal if I'm trying to hear a little subtle thing. There's been times where mixers have said, how can you not hear that sound? I'm like, I don't hear that. And they're like, it's right there. I'm like, I don't hear anything. Utility's been right next to me. Don't hear it either. And that's because some information is lost in that double transmission. Now, I've also been in the same kind of circumstance where I've been using an MM1 on my belt, and I'm still in the double transmission system, and I'm listening to the transmission back from the sound mixer, and the sound mixer has told me that exact circumstance. I've simply unplugged from my R1A or R1 that's been providing my sound, plugged into the MM1, listened, and said, oh yeah, there it is. Because you can hear higher quality if you come straight in off of an MM1, because it's basically like a high quality preamp that's pulling in and driving the microphone, and you could plug right up and listen to that. So that is one circumstance right there. If you're on a cable system, you have that advantage of being able to have full dynamic range. The way the sound was basically recorded straight through the microphone and pulled in straight from the microphone. And that's a great circumstance, a great way to listen to it. The disadvantage is You then have to worry about getting cables from your mixer, who might be a couple of 100 feet away, hiding in a closet someplace, and into wherever you're going. Technically, that falls on the sound utility, but me as a boom operator, I like to do that cable because I know a sound utility is already doing too much as it is. And if you're in a circumstance where there's only one door in or out, getting that cable in there could be a very, very difficult task. There was a circumstance I was in a few years ago, and I was up on a top level. We were shooting, I should say, at the top level of a school. There's only 3 stairs up. After everybody had gone through the elevator, though, the sound mixer was trying to get up to that level, and the elevator died. Sound mixer was the last guy trying to get up there for the day. Was not able to. So what I did is I ran up the stairs, I took my boom cable, threw it out the window down to the sound utility, who plugged it up down there, and we basically routed 250 feet of cable into where I was booming, and I was able to boom the entire scene because our wireless transmitters, we can only get the antennas so close when you were down on the lower level. And it's not just like dropping it down and pointing the antennas at the ceiling. There was a whole second building in the way out that window. So we actually had to open it up all the way, crawl up there and extend out and run down the end of the building and throw it down there. Closest sound mixer could get was on the loading dock. So it wasn't even an option to really get a good and trusty wireless signal. So in that case, wireless boom would not have been an option. Cable boom saved the day. Now, you also have the option, if you don't want to do something like a boombox, remote audio boombox, you can just go cabled via an XLR cable and then get a transmission back. The advantage on that is that you can take your boom, put it in your boom caddy, walk around and still hear through your IFB what's going on set. Now, that's a good kind of halfway circumstance. Whenever you still can get a cabled system, you still have to worry about routing that boom cable. That's still, if you turn around, for example, it's going to mean cabling out of the shot, back and around the building in a different way, maybe through a window. Depends on the circumstance you're in. Sometimes I've even had to go in and through the ceiling. I've had to take the drop ceiling, push it up, and throw a cable over into the next office in order to pull it back to the sound mixer because it's been in the shot otherwise. Not easy to deal with, but I've done it. Now, disadvantages of cabled systems. You obviously can't do something like a 360. If you're doing a walk and talk, you're at the mercy of your sound utility cabling you back. That's not really a safe circumstance. I've had a utility who was not able to cable back quick enough, and I've seen the cable start to come down between me, tripping me, then almost the Steadicam operator, and then as it was starting to go farther and farther out, the Steadicam operator had gone a little bit over to the side. I'm watching it approach Jennifer Love Hewitt and somebody walking, and I'm like, oh crap. It's right before they're about to enter their door. I know if I don't grab my cable and yank it, it's going to be tripping our actors. So what do you think I did? I'm booming. I had to go quickly upwards with it vertically and yank the thing just enough, to get it back under control and yank that cable out of the way to prevent talent from tripping on it. That's a very real circumstance. So I do not recommend using a cabled boom on anything like a 360 shot. Whenever you're doing a Steadicam shot, basically, or handheld moving, following actors, I would not recommend a cabled boom in that circumstance at all. If your camera is basically on a dolly and is doing a dolly shot or pushing around on dance floor, track or something like that, in that circumstance, you can go cabled without a problem. If you do any kind of a handheld camera move or Steadicam, that's my rule of thumb. I will not go on a cable boom circumstance if I have to move more than about 15 feet, because at that point I'm having to do too much cable maintenance and not maintenance, but management. In order to actually keep my cable from getting on dolly track or moving underneath someone's feet or something like that. As for having a utility over there page my cable behind me, I'm not interested in them doing that, simply because if I'm going over 15 feet, I would much prefer to just go on a wireless boom system where I don't even have to think about the cable. Chances are that movement is going to be enough for me to focus on. And so I would prefer not to have to worry about a cable at all. Now, advantages and disadvantages of a wireless system. Actually, one more thing real quick about the cable. If you have to cross over something like a header cable, something that's powering a 20,000 watt light, if you're having to go over something like that and your cables are not able to maintain that without creating a buzz, what you're going to have to do is get something like a pancake from the grips, lay that on top of the header, and then cross over it. the wood will prevent the electrons from going in. So there is that too. Interference is not something that is only to the cabled world, especially in a high power environment like being on set. Now, there is the luxury now of just using more and more cooler lights, LEDs, for example, that don't require very huge amounts of power, but still we're using HMIs in the real world, so that is something to still be aware of. Now let's talk about being on a wireless system. First of all, there is latency to it. So if your latency is not matching your boom or any of your hardlined microphones, you have to add latency, or you need to add delay to the cabled booms in order to equal the delay of the wireless booms, in order to not have the microphones phase each other. And by that, I mean like you bring one up or not, and phasing probably isn't the right way to word it. It would be more along the lines of echo. Technically, it could phase because they go out with each other, but probably echo would be a better way to do it, because a better way to mention it, because you're talking about milliseconds here. And a boom that is completely delayed, you're going to hear it, kind of almost twice. You're going to hear a bit of an echo in there. Does happen. But another thing about that is there's always compression built into wireless transmitters, at least as of the time of this video. Even on the best digital systems, there is still compression because you want to compress that audio before you transmit it so you have an ideal circumstance. So your audio is compressed, but because of that, it does sound like it's louder on the other end. And a lot of the times, people think louder is better. And that compression will go into your mix track, and therefore people at Video Village are going to hear it better. If Post wants to expand it and create more dynamic range or adjust the level, they can easily do that in their computers. But if you're talking about the transmitter just getting back there for the mix track that's going to be heard on the dailies and by the director and everybody at Video Village on the day, then in that circumstance, it's going to be probably better, because they're going to say, well, I can hear it louder. The dynamics are not going to be anything they're thinking about. They're going to be adjusting their volume if they have to go up and down too much. But technically, a mixer should be adjusting for that regardless. But that's going to be something that compression will help by being louder. A lot of the times by being louder, even though it does bring up your noise floor, it's something that the sound mixer himself or herself is going to put into the mix at a certain level and probably have to adjust their levels a little bit less than they would on a cabled system. And that's probably going to mean that the people at Video Village will appreciate it even more. Now, you are susceptible to wireless RF at that point. And if you have a transmitter, you're also going to have to worry about batteries and changing out those batteries. If they're rechargeable, probably every 3 hours. If they're not rechargeable, then maybe you might be able to survive an entire morning. If you're using an MM1, you might be able to survive an entire day, maybe a day and a half, depending on your show. So you have to do battery management and maintenance if you're going to be doing anything with something on your side. And when I say maintenance, I mean like on an MM1, if you're doing a show that involves a lot of dirt, debris, you're shooting out on the beach, you're going to have to clean that a whole lot, because it is going to be supplying a lot of clean audio requires you to clean the connectors a bit sometimes. And on Walking Dead, for example, it was dirty almost every single day, and they were shooting stuff into the air and explosions and everything. And so our MM1s got gunked up, and about every week we had to clean them. So that's the maintenance I'm referring to. Now, that's not to say that if you go cabled, you won't have to worry about that either. But it's definitely something to be aware of, because in the circumstances where there's rain, for example, you have to completely engulf and protect your wireless transmitter, versus a boom where you can simply cable coming straight out of the back of the microphone if you want to, and then go straight through to the sound mixer. And if you have a pigtail on the end of a Zeppelin, for example, you can simply wrap that around with something like press and seal, or put it in a bag, or put it in whatever system you want to, and then run that back to your sound mixer. And you don't have to worry about RF, especially taking all of the press and seal or whatever off of the transmitter in order to get in there to change batteries. Not something you want to have to worry about. Now, if you're doing any kind of work outside in the wet, in any kind of conditions, muddy circumstances, you probably don't want to have to deal with the cable, because it's going to mean a lot more cable that you're going to have to clean later, or rather your utility is. So that may be an advantage also. Just go cabled in the circumstances where you're not worrying about any kind of the elements or dirt and dust, debris, anything like that. If you're on the side of a cliff, you don't want to have to throw a cable down there because then you're not going to be able to retrieve the end of it. And it could end up being a problem if that cable gets snagged on something. So in that circumstance, wireless may be the best option. Personally, let me start back here a little bit. I used to prefer to always go cabled boom, even though it meant that I was constantly rerouting cable. I didn't mind so much because I liked the quality of it. I liked not having to mess with my preamps, or my gain rather, on my belt or on the end of the transmitter. I didn't used to like to mess with that. And I would like to be able to I like the option of being able to listen to something like, for example, the mix track in one ear, my boom only in the other. That was an option I had on a cabled system. And if you're using a stereo transmission system, something like the Duet by Electrosonics, you could probably still get your sound mixer to give you that feed if you're interested in it. However, one of the reasons why, the big reason I should say, why I stopped being interested in using a cabled boom is because the bigger shows you work on, the more day players you have. And the bigger chance of them getting someone green to come in as one of their multi-additionals when you start to get into high teens or 20 or so grips from electricians, that's when you're going to probably have more green people. Sure, you're going to have more experienced ones too, but the green ones are probably going to mess something up and probably be put on more simple tasks. And about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was working on a TV show, and the rigging gaffer, as we were doing the turnaround, ran a condor into the Georgia power line. And that ended up creating an arc, which shorted out almost the entire house that we were shooting in and everything connected up to it. That meant that the sound mixer, his entire cart got completely fried. The DIT card, everything except the hard drive, luckily, fried, including the monitors. The only thing connecting up between the sound mixer's cart and the DIT was the video cable coming from the DIT back to the sound mixer. And when the the electrical surge went through the entire cable from frying the sound mixer's cart, went through and up the video cable and fried out the entire DIT card. When that happened, and every single thing fried, what happened to me since I was on a cabled system? Well, luckily nothing, because I had just disconnected it from my belt. And I I literally just dropped it and looked at the camera operator and said, hey, if I route my cable around that way, and we all paused on set. What was that noise? Again. And then all of a sudden the ADs start coming in. Everyone get out of the house, get out of the house, get out of the house. Go out now, get out of the house, not talking, leave your stuff, get out. We were like, what's going on here? That arc was basically sparking and making booms and a lot of stuff for a long time, a lot of loud noises for a long time. As a matter of fact, it took about an hour and 15 minutes or so for Georgia Power to come by and disconnect the power. But until they came, it was sparking like this.
Get the hell up. Yep.
And it was doing this for about an hour and 15 minutes. If I were connected up to that boom cable, I would have been fried by 38,000 volts. So since that time, I'm not that interested in going cabled boom, unless I absolutely have to. Now, there are circumstances that you would prefer to use a cabled system. Like, for example, if you're routing out a gunshot mic, definitely use that on a cable system where you have full dynamic range control. But that's not a boom, is it? It's your mixer's choice, obviously. Personally, though, I find it to be very much a deal breaker if I'm told I'm going to be cabled boom all the time. Because as sets get moving faster and faster, people are trying to get things done. Now, sure, it's always happened that way at the end of the day. But as people are trying to move faster now, there could be a circumstance where an accident happens that probably, maybe not, would have happened before. I don't want to take the risk personally. But that is a little bit about a cabled versus a wireless type boom circumstance. Which do you use? Sound Mixer will obviously have the answer. And if this is any kind of concern to you, if you are doing a cabled boom most of the time and you have to go wireless, you'll have to tell them you'll need to be wireless for the scene. If you're wireless all the time and you're dealing with a scene with a heavy amount of dynamic range, you may end up saying, I think I need to be cabled on this circumstance. Your choice. but I wanted you to at least have the information there. So there you have it. I hope that this helped you to understand a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages about a cabled and a wireless boom. Because as a boom operator, it's something you need to manage along with your sound mixer.
Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.